You yourself say in the book, what makes a wine truly authentic? We talk about terroir and soil and climate, and its signature of the place. Are we fetishizing all of that?
Yes. What is deemed authentic in Roman times is not necessarily what some of us might consider authentic today. Often it depends who you are, what country you live in, what period you're alive in. In Roman times, they added herbs and lead salts and honey to the wine because it tasted foul. We've come to a certain place now in our evolution of science that we can make wine that tastes good and can be kept for a long time. Some people think that having sulfur dioxide in wine to help preserve it, to stop it from microbial infection, is wrong. Don't agree with them. There are just so many shades of what you might think is authentic, and it really differs from person to person.
Yeah, it is a spectrum from the puritanical to the fraudster. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 256. How do you avoid buying a fake bottle of wine? What makes wine truly authentic? How did Rudy Kurniawan get so far in his fraudulent schemes worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and why did they ultimately unravel? In today's episode, you'll hear the stories and tips that answer those questions in part 2 of our chat with Rebecca Gibb, master of wine and author of the new book, Vintage Crime, A Short History of Wine Fraud. You don't need to have listened to part 1 from last week first, but I hope you'll go back, if you missed it, after you finish this one. Here's a review of my new memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much from Sylvain Sigard in Prince Edward County. Natalie McLean's latest book is quite different from her first 2 books, but it is equally enjoyable. It's a pleasant and fast read. Her prose is light, friendly, even poetic. The book has a quick cadence of wit, self-reflection, and information. It sheds light on who she is, the people, and the values she cares for, and the difficult wine world within which she operates. She also calls for an open dialogue about the structural intolerance and harassment which exists within parts of the wine industry. Wines are a kaleidoscope of terroir, varietals, styles, aromas, flavors, and vintages. So should wineries and winemakers also be inclusive of the rainbow of cultures, creeds, colors, genders, and ages in order to kindly express the full range and greatness in the wonderful world of winemaking. Kudos to Natalie for her candor, courage, and couth. Despite her self-deprecating image, she displayed great leadership in rising above the layers of personal and professional challenges of working in the wine industry. And stylistically, she has a classy way to give back to friends and foes by pouring a generous glass of life learnings. 5 stars. Thank you, Sylvain. If you've read the book or are reading it, I'd love to hear from you at natalie@nataliemclean.com. If you haven't got your copy yet and would like to support it and this podcast that I do on a volunteer basis, please order it from any online book retailer, no matter where you live. Every little bit helps spread the message. I'll put a link in the show notes to all retailers worldwide at nataliemclean.com/256. Coming up, I'll be hosting a wine tasting and book launch event at the Ottawa Writers Festival on Friday, October 27th at 6:30 p.m. 2 glasses of wine are included. Register at writersfestival.org. I'll also be hosting an event on Thursday, November 9th at 7 p.m. that you can attend no matter where you live. Treat yourself and your friends to a live online wine tasting and inspirational conversation between Men O'Reilly and yours truly about all things wine. I'll share the juicy behind-the-scenes stories about those who make, market, and write about wine. All you need to do to join this private online party is purchase wine from one of the following top-notch wineries: Quails Gate, Westcott Vineyards, or Benjamin Bridge. Now, you can also choose to buy wines from 2 of the wineries or all 3. It's your choice, but at least one to participate. All 3 wineries ship across Canada to your doorstep and will include a copy of the book. If you already have it, give it as a holiday gift, as I'll be sending out signed book plates for every copy. You'll also receive a Zoom link at the email address that you used to buy the wine. Do you live outside Canada? You can still participate. Email me for details at natalie@nataliemclean.com. Let's get you warmed up for your holiday season with this fun discussion and wine tasting. Make it a holiday gift to yourself. You do deserve a treat. Can't make it to the live event? Don't worry. Everyone who registers will be sent a video recording link after the event that you and your friends can watch and taste along with at your own convenience. Make that your holiday tasting party. Please let your friends, family, and colleagues know about these events. I'll include links to the events and the wineries in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/256. Okay, on with the show. Okay, the Austrian wine scandal, which again we'll summarize. You have to get the juicy details in the book. But in 1985, a certain small group, I think, of vintners were adding an ingredient. I don't know if it was an ingredient of antifreeze, or it was confused with antifreeze, or both. It certainly wasn't lethal, except in extreme amounts. But tell us what they were adding and why they were doing it.
So you need context of what's happening in Austria at that time. People have been planting a lot of vines because they've been told that there's going to be this huge market for Austrian wine. Doesn't materialize. And so there's big yields, lots of grapes, not making very nice wine. And there's a taste at this time for sweet wine. And they've been told there's been a law being changed that they're not allowed to add glucose, anyway, a sweetening agent anymore. And somebody who's feeling inventive discovers that they can use a thing called diethylene glycol, which is an antifreeze. Antifreeze is actually ethylene glycol. But somebody in the media department who wants to make a sensation, somebody in the news department of some magazine or newspaper or television station gets the two.
Media.
I know, media, and as journalists get the compound confused, and suddenly it becomes the antifreeze scandal, which it isn't. But yeah, they're adding basically this diethylene glycol. It plumps out on wine. It's like kind of like what sugar does to a wine. It plumps it out, it makes it richer, just a lot more lovely and easy to drink. If you go in Germany or Austria, you can have some real high acids in your wine. It can just smooth any creases out.
Wow. But it wasn't lethal. Did it have any sort of deleterious effect, or it was just an illegal ingredient? Like that was the main problem with it?
Well, it was in large quantities, not good for your health.
Okay.
But in small quantities, yeah, it wasn't going to kill you in small quantities. In very large, you'd have to drink an awful lot of wine, and pretty alcohol poisoning would get you before the diethylene glycol would get you. But, the story breaks and, media gets hold of it and people don't really know what the effects are. So it becomes a big scandal and there's a lot of concern. There's a lot of misinformation. But as a result, the Austrian wine scene is just devastated by it.
Huh. Yeah, you say exports dropped 90% and didn't recover for 16 years, which is incredible. What a damage to their reputation.
It's a huge damage to the reputation. You also have to look at taking that with a pinch of salt as well. Exports have never been massive for Austria.
Okay.
Austrian wine has been traditionally drunk by Austrians before it happened, but for exports were really, to begin with, were like Germany and Switzerland. So often German-speaking places. But, I think you'll probably agree that what you've seen in the last 15, 20 years, what comes out of Austria now is worthy of, more often than not, is worthy of Michelin star restaurants. There's a lot of very fine wine coming out of Austria now. They've really turned it around.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. The quality is amazing. So did they do anything else, the Austrians, apart from fixing the issue and improving their quality and perhaps implementing new laws? Was there anything else they did to recover their reputation?
Well, I think the new laws they became very stringent.
Okay.
People went to prison. A lot of people went out of business in the late 1980s. because of the scandal. The sales just absolutely, it's taken a really long time for Austria to come back. But yeah, stringent wine laws have really sort of pulled it up by its britches.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the flagship white wine, Gruner Veltliner, and even the light reds are superb food wines. I mean, I recommend them all the time. And they have, what's working against them is I don't think so much the memory is faded, at least for new consumers, of that scandal, but it's just hard to pronounce these names, don't know where they come from. Like they still have a lot of marketing they have to do, I think, and consumer awareness, but they are doing it for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Gruner Veltliner and Riesling are great. I love the purity of them, their dry styles, and at least the great variety on the label.
True.
Which is helpful.
Yeah, that's helpful.
And they don't have the crazy predicats level. You don't have to start looking at Cabinet and Spätlese and Trockenbeer and Auslese, and you're just left scratching your head.
All the German classifications. Okay, so let's keep going in our little speedboat here. One of the most famous counterfeit wines involved a bottle from Thomas Jefferson's cellar. Now, this wasn't during that time, but it was much later. I don't know if it's the 90s or when it happened, but it subsequently resulted in a book called The Billionaire's Vinegar, which might be made into a movie. But how did this fraudster get away with this? He was passing off a bottle, very expensive bottles, as belonging to the former U.S. president.
How did Hardy Rodenstock get away with, pulling the wool over people's eyes?
Yeah.
Well, I think we can look at Hardy Rodenstock, because his real name was Meinhard Gurke, and he was like a minor pop band, folksy German band manager. But he loved wine, and he became part of the German fine wine scene. He was a real part of it. And there's no doubt that a lot of the wines that he brought to dinners and a lot of the wines that he shared were actually the real deal. But then he I think he took things too far. Perhaps it's that ego thing that we see in the MICE acronym that we talked about earlier. I think that he starts to find all these treasures, and people are like, oh, where's he got this from? But people are being like, chateau owners, like the owner of Chateau Yquem, lots of fine wine people were backing him and saying this is the real deal. And at Christie's auction house, they sold his wines. They sold this Thomas Jefferson bottle for a world-breaking amount to Malcolm Forbes.
How much was it?
It was over £100,000, and it took less than 2 minutes to sell it. It was crazy. At the time, this is barely 30 years ago, so that's a lot of money at the time, and it goes on display in Fifth Avenue. Anyway, how does he manage to dupe people for so long? He's vehement that he's in the right. He's not a nice man if you dare question his authority. And he had the backing of, Christie's. They said the wines were authentic.
The auction house.
They were authentic. Yeah. And I think this is a big problem the wine industry has faced in a long time, is that, we haven't had the technology or the know-how to call out fraud. And when you're in the wine trade, you might know everyone likes everyone else to most of the extent, but there's sort of a chumminess within the wine industry, and there's an element of trust that you're giving me is correct. And I think that the wine industry has traded off trust for too long, and it has come to the realization that perhaps there needs to be more scrupulous.
I forget which U.S. president was, but trust and verify. I don't know if that was Reagan or who it was, but trust and then verify. Yeah, so he finally got found out. How was he discovered?
Did he finally get discovered, though? Because...
Oh, did he? Oh.
Well, he didn't, but
did he get
to the bitter end? Well, a court ruled that, he was... a court ruled eventually, like after 25 years, that, there was misdoing that he'd committed fraud, but he didn't turn up for the hearing, and he kept flatly denying it. He never went to prison. He never paid any money in reparations.
But he did go to jail or prison, rather? Yeah, okay.
No.
Okay. Huh.
No, and this is the problem. There have not really been, the rewards are high and the risk is being quite low.
Right.
No one had been jailed for wine fraud until Rudy Kurniawan, and that's 2013 off the top of my head. Yeah, so he commits this fraud. I think he loses face. And he falls out the wine scene. But he never kind of goes away. And there was always this question mark over him. He died recently, but there's always been this big question mark over the veracity of the wines. And will we ever truly know?
Right, right. And you mentioned his next door neighbor in the Hall of Rogues here, Rudy
The Hall of
Kurniawan.
Rose, I like that. I'll use that.
Well, wine rogues, yes, please do. He had a taste for the high life. He was another fraudster. If I'm quoting you correctly, ran up a credit card bill of $6 million at one point, and a large chunk of it, was it Versace or some other high-end designer?
Hermes. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
Hermes.
mean,
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
he racked up some great credit card bills on Amex, so he'd got a lot of points.
Wow. Not good, though, if you can't use them from jail.
No, not so much.
No.
But no, yeah, I call him the Great Gatsby of wine in my book. He's a bit like
That's
the Harley
great.
Rosenstock. He starts buying up wine, he gets himself a reputation, he ingratiates himself with the fine wine circles, the guys who go to the auction houses. He socializes in high-flying circles. People don't have any. He goes to fine dining. He talks about wine. He seems quite knowledgeable. People start trusting him. So it's a good basis to start committing fraud from.
Absolutely. People love to be in his company, and he was quite generous in sharing both real and fake wines. But he got found out for a Bordeaux, I think it was a Ponsac wine. What happened?
Oh,
What was his mistake?
yes. No, it was Laurent Ponceau. It was in 1929, Laurent Ponceau from
Ponceau.
Burgundy, yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, basically that's when things were starting to unravel for him.
Uh-huh.
I think there's a wine forum called Wine Berserkers that
Yes.
I don't frequent. Just, yeah. I don't go on it. It's highfalutin wine circles for men. I haven't seen any women on there recently, or ever, in fact. So it's a circle for wine collectors, and people were starting to question him and going, how did he get his hands on this and such like. But then he put lots of auction houses were still taking his wine, and they were still auctioning them off. And wine authenticators were authenticating people's cellars, and they were finding a lot of wines that they bought that were from Rudy Kurniawan that had gone through auction houses' supposed selection process, and they turned out to be fraudulent. But yeah, it was a bottle of some Laurent Ponceau. They hadn't started domain bottling yet in 1929, so it couldn't have existed. So Laurent Ponceau flows over to New York to go, what's going on? You can't sell this wine by auction because it doesn't exist. I think that in Rudy's words, excuse my French, but he says, sometimes shit happens, he was quoted as saying. And, that's not really a good enough response, is it? And the FBI were on his case at this time. And yeah, finally they raided his Californian house early one morning, and it all turned to custard for him.
It was kind of like a grow house, but for wine. You said it had like cheap heaters, and there was bottles on his treadmill and labels everywhere. It just sounded like a kind of...
He was really caught red-handed. It was like a climate-controlled house. He was living there with his mother, and they were only in their rooms. That was the only place where there were heaters. Yeah, there were bottles on the treadmill. They found recipes for like 1945 Mouton Rothschild, how to make
recipes,
stamps, wax. Yeah, the FBI agent in charge called it sort of a modern day wine factory.
Wow. That's so funny. It usually is those small details that will trip up the criminals. I forgot to ask you or mention back in the Austrian antifreeze, what actually broke that scandal? What was one vintner trying to do?
Yeah.
That was just so silly.
An inordinate quantity of diethylene glycol, and he tried to claim the tax back on it. And his account wondered why he had so much. Smart.
Yeah, it's usually accounting that'll get you. Either that or vintage.
No one likes
That's how they get all the gangsters or the mob. So your stories raise an important question, as you yourself say in the book. What makes a wine truly authentic? Yeah, you raising your hand. For those who can't see her. Yeah, is there anything that comes to mind in terms of, I mean, I guess a wine is what it says it is. Could be one definition, but, we talk about terroir and soil and climate, and its signature of the place and all this sort of thing. Are we fetishizing all of that?
Yes. Yes, we are. No, I think that this is a history of wine fraud, and what is deemed authentic in Roman times is not necessarily what some of us might consider authentic today. Often it depends who you are, what country you live in, what period you're alive in. If you're a vintner, if you're a grape grower, you're a vintner, you're a wine consumer, a wine merchant, that can alter what you think is an authentic wine. Your attitude towards making wine, whether I don't want to talk about natural wine, but it has to be said, some people who follow the natural wine movement, grow their grapes organically. They think that only grapes should be in it and wild yeast should take hold, and that is all that should be in wine. That's what they consider natural wine. That's what they think is truly authentic. That was how people made wine in Roman times, and that's why they added herbs and lead, salts, and honey to the wine, because it tasted foul. We've come to a certain place in our life now, in our evolution of science, that we can make wine that tastes good and can be kept for a long time, so that we can expect a wine that tastes pleasurable. And it's where it is what it is that on the label. Some people think that, having sulfur dioxide in wine to help preserve it, to stop it from microbial infection is wrong. Don't agree with them. People do add yeast. There are just so many shades of what you might think is authentic, and it really differs from person to person. I think we have our own opinion on that.
Yeah, it is a spectrum from the puritanical to the fraudster. And where do you find yourself fitting in the middle somewhere?
And I think there's also another debate that if you are a fraudster and someone is drinking your bottle of... So imagine you're drinking a bottle of Kurniawan's 1945 Mint Rothschild. Well, they said it was 2 parts Costa d'Estinel, 1 part Chateau Parma, 1 part high-end Cabernet. Now, do you know what? Most of us can't afford to drink Costa d'Estinel or, Parma. I'm like, that sounds like a pretty delicious drink to me.
It does, yeah.
If you have a bottle of that and you don't know you have it and you drink it and you think it is the real deal, are you a victim?
Right.
Possibly not.
Great question.
Are you a victim if you don't know that you've been duped?
And you've had the sublime experience of your life and you feel satisfied and you talk about it with your friends. Yeah. Is there any crime? I mean, technically, yes, but still.
And do you know what?
Are you a victim?
If you drink, the 85-15 rule in wine, that, if you say your wine is 85% Shiraz, it can have 15% something else in it. So if you're think you're buying a bottle of Shiraz and you think it's 100% Shiraz, do you feel duped? Not really.
Yeah.
But you probably don't know the laws anyway. So it doesn't make any difference to you. If you enjoyed the glass of wine, wine is meant to bring pleasure. And that's ultimately what my book is about. Wine is meant to bring pleasure. People have committed fraud in the past because wine wasn't pleasurable. Most people can make a pleasurable wine today without doing anything dodgy. Or, you drink a bottle of Bordeaux and it's a blend of varieties. Is it any less pure because it's Merlot, Cabernet, and Cabernet Franc? Yeah, there are so many things to think about. Laws embedded that's okay, but is it?
Yeah. No, that's great. I love the bigger questions that arise from these stories. They're fantastic.
Yeah, I've spent years thinking about these, and I think that you can keep on thinking about it and you can change your mind every time that you discuss it.
And that's what makes it interesting. So it's okay to keep going back and forth. So what modern technology today is being used to deter fraud?
Lots of things are being used to deter fraud. I mean, as I said in the last sentence, I was talking about this, if you're drinking a $15, $20 bottle of wine, you shouldn't, when you buy it in a wine store or a supermarket, there shouldn't really be any reason why there should be any fraud. There's really no reason to do it. But they're at the high end now where you can pay thousands of dollars for a bottle of high-end wine. You do want to be assured that what is in that is what it says it is. So, Chateau Margaux in Bordeaux on the left bank, they take it to the extreme. They have vintage-specific bottle molds. So,
the bottle changes every vintage?
There's a specific mold, yeah. You might have laser egg.
Wow, that's costly.
Yeah. It's not a $10 bottle of wine, is it?
True. Yes, they have the margins.
I don't... If you've been at the chateau and you've seen the fancy things there, you're not worrying too much about their profit margin. And then there's things like laser etched bottles, there's QR codes, and there's in some bottles now you can get underneath the capsule, you can get there's a seal that you can break. And if it's broken and if people try to refill the bottle, that specific bottle, they know that the seal has already been broken on that because there's technology.
It sends a message back. It's like a chip or something.
It's like a chip. So you can got that.
Oh, wow.
A lot of the wine authentication is actually done by wine authenticators. You can hire wine authenticators these days. I mean, they just have an encyclopedic knowledge of the fonts that we used and all the labeling and such on the bottles. That is not my domain.
Right.
People who can do that, people who authenticate, if you have a serious wine collection. But if you're going into a wine store and you're buying a bottle of wine and you have a trusted wine merchant,
just relax,
just Take it easy.
Life's too short. But yeah, I've heard they're even developing like Bitcoin-like ledgers and NFTs and things like this to track the life cycle of a bottle from when it leaves the winery to, its entire provenance, the way it travels through different owners or retailers, wholesalers, and so on. So I find that very fascinating where this is all going.
It's fascinating. But we don't know where it is going. And we don't know whether the technology that we're using now will be totally antiquated in 10 years' time. So,
sure.
Yeah, it's once again, there are, it all depends. And there's no, like terroir, there is, when you go to a French vineyard and you ask a question, they're like, ça dépend. And you're like, no, I really just want a straight answer.
Yeah, just tell me. All right, so you have a bottle of wine there. It's the real deal. What wine do you have with you, Rebecca?
I hope so. I got it direct from the winery. It was sent to me. Unless there was some tampering by the courier service en route. Now, I have bought today a bottle of Domaine Huet, Clos de Boucs from Vouvray. So at the moment, I'm tasting lots of Chenin Blanc for vinous.
Yes.
And it has a link to my favourite book that I also have brought along, which is Wine and War by Don and...
Wine and War.
It's quite old now. I mean...
Don and Petie Kladstrup,
2001
right?
It was published.
Yes, that's a fascinating book. Again, focuses on the stories of the people behind wine, especially during the war.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there's a little link here. I love Chenin, and I feel that it's underrated.
Yes.
And I cover the Loire Valley. That's one of my sort of areas. And there's a story in Wine and War about Gaston Huet. Now, during World War II, he was a prisoner of war. And he was a German prisoner of war for 5 years. And then he comes back to his vineyard, and during all the horses had been requisitioned. They had no fertilizer, no pesticides. The vineyards had been just devastated by disease. And when he came back to Vouvray, he eventually got back to Vouvray. He lost a third of his body weight. He was a skeleton. He hadn't met his daughter, who was 5, 6 by the time he got back. And rebuilt the vineyards and have become just one of the most, the wines are total thoroughbreds, and they are an absolute icon for me, Vouvray and Chenin Blanc wines.
Oh, wow. And so what does that particular one taste like? You've got it in your glass there. So.
Yeah, it's a demi-sec. Now, like demi-sec's also becoming around. Everyone wants dry wines these days, and everyone goes, "Ooh, it's sweet." It's sweet. It's only just sweet, and it's perfect. It's great for food pairing, and I just love it.
What would you pair with it?
I think it's just delicious with creamy sauces. And there's a lot of dishes that we have with like slight sweet elements, whether it's like a honeyed element. We add sugar to sour things. And I just think it's just great for that. And it's just, you know what? It's also just delicious just drinking on its own.
On its own, yeah, for pleasure.
What I love most about the Huet wines is that they have this sweetness element, but they're not rich. They're like drinking, it's like drinking a cloud, a very delicate cloud.
I love
There's
that.
no weight to these wines. They're so delicate, and they just like float along, even though they have.
So this is the drink of the angels or the gods.
It's pure. It's just such incredibly pure, pristine fruit, and I think that it shows that. And do you know what? I think that when you're in a cool climate like the Loire Valley, despite climate change, you've got this amazing acidity, and you do need a little bit of residual sugar to provide a balanced wine. And when the wine is balanced, you don't even think about sugar. And I think that, people should, there are a lot of people in Vouvray at the moment who are really obsessed with making dry wines because the market demands them, but they're often unbalanced.
Yes. Well, and the old adage, we talk dry and drink sweet. We get a lot of pleasure. Sweetness is the first taste we developed in life. And there's no shame. There's a lot of wine shaming going on about people who like an off-dry or sweet wine. They're just very pleasurable.
Yeah, it's your pleasure. It's your glass. It's your mouth. Drink what you want. It really is.
Exactly.
Drink what you enjoy.
Exactly.
It's nobody else's business.
Absolutely. Amen. All right. That puts us right into the lightning round.
Oh, gosh.
Rebecca?
I'm dreading this.
Don't worry. Oh, no, don't worry. Describe the weirdest wine pairing you've ever had.
Yeah.
You don't know, or there have been so many strange ones in your life.
I cannot give you an answer to that. I have thought about it.
Did you ever pair any sort of fast food, junk food, anything like that?
You know
or just you stick to meat and potatoes, do you?
I do. I don't really care about food and wine pairing. That's a terrible thing to say. I know.
That's all right.
I think we focus on it too much, and it
Fair enough.
makes me stressed. I don't like to get stressed. I've already got enough stress in my life. To avoid a wine pairing just makes another stress. And I think we should do what the Egyptians used to do and suggest wines for celebration, like wines for event, like if it's wines for certain periods in your life. So wine for dancing, wines for your tax return, wines for...
what would you suggest for the tax return? I'll keep it in mind for next
port,
year.
Something really like 20%
Something
alcohol,
strong.
just get you through it.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe a bittersweet finish. Depending on your return, of course. But okay, fair enough. And you've already talked about your favorite wine book, so we'll skip right over that, Wine and More, which is great. We will put a link to that and, of course, your own book. Is there been a useful wine gadget that you've come across?
You told me I couldn't have a caravan, and you told me I couldn't have a White's corkscrew. Can I have a glass?
Yes, you can have a glass. You are allowed
Thanks.
that. The next person can't, but you can. Do you have a favorite wine glass?
The one that's nearest to me.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like what that is not. I'm trying to guess the brand there.
I have a lot of Riedels. When you pass the Master of Wine, they send you an inordinate amount of free wine glasses.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the perks after you spent $10,000 on getting your certification, get a few free glasses. Yes.
Cheers to that.
Cheers. Now, if you could share a bottle of wine with any person outside the wine world, living or dead, who would that be, and where would you take them or meet them?
You know what? I've always really wanted to meet Bill Bryson, the author.
Oh, really? The author, yes. Sunburnt Country, and then he wrote about Britain too, didn't he?
Island.
Oh, that's it. Yes.
I saw him. I saw him in King's Cross Station in London. He literally walked past me and I was like, I'm sure that's Bill Bryson. And I didn't know what to do. I was a bit starstruck. About 2 minutes later, I was like, just go and ask him if he wants to go for a pint with you. So I turned around and tried to find him and he'd gone anyway. So yeah, he writes a great story. And I think that's just such a gift.
He is a wonderful writer. In fact, he's one of my inspirations when I write about wine because he's all about the people. He's all about the storytelling. He's got a lovely sense of humor. And yet, you find out surprising things that you might mention at a dinner party or whatever. He really, he's able to touch all the senses and enliven everything about his stories. I just love his approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And which bottle of wine would you share with Bill? Or would it be a pint, I guess?
Maybe a good old British pint. Yeah, it could be a British pint,
of course.
Otherwise,
nothing stuffy.
It could be an English sparkling wine. Although we'd probably...
Okay, sure. Yeah, the next best thing to a pint. Excellent. Now, Rebecca, this has been fantastic. As we wrap up our conversation, is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to share?
So the book's out in October in the US and Canada.
Good.
And it's available on Kindle. It will also be available. It's going to be available as an audiobook.
All right. Are you reading it?
I'm not reading it.
Okay.
It's been published by a company called Podium in the US. And do you remember, I don't know whether you ever watched, I didn't, but did you ever watch the series Lost?
Yeah, the first series, the first season.
Well, there's a British actress who's in Lost who is voicing it. So
very good.
I've never done it. I did quite fancy it, but I simply don't have the time right now. So, she's a professional, so I'll let her carry on.
Absolutely.
I hope she pronounces all the French words properly. Good luck to her.
Yes.
Yeah. What else?
And where can we find this book online?
Online, the usual. Begins with A, ends in N.
All the bookstores.
Name of a famous rainforest in South America. Yeah, all good bookstores. It's being published by University of California Press. If you've got any questions or you want to read more about it, you can go on the University of California Press website or mine, which is RebeccaGibb.com. I didn't make it fancy, it's fairly simple. Yeah.
Yeah. And we will put all those links in the show notes and in the live stream chat here. Rebecca, it's been wonderful. I really appreciate your time. The stories are amazing. I loved your book. We just skipped along the surface. So people do have to get this book if they really want the juicy insider stories. But thank you. Thank you for spending your time with us and for writing this book.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Cheers for now.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our chat with Rebecca. Here are my takeaways. Rebecca shared some great tips on how we can avoid buying a fake bottle of wine. 2, I found her discussion of what makes wine truly authentic fascinating. And 3, The story of Rudy Kurniawan and his fraudulent schemes sounds like the script of a movie or a Netflix special. No doubt someone will be making it soon. In the show notes, you can find the full transcript of my conversation with Rebecca, links to her website and books, the video versions of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live, where you can order my book online now, no matter where you live, and links to my upcoming wine tasting and book launch events. That's all in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/256. Email me if you have a sip, tip, question, or if you've read my book or are in the process of reading it at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. I would love to hear from you. If you missed episode 29, go back and take a listen. I chat with wine consultant Maureen Downey about wine scandals, fakes, and forgery. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
I worked in auctions for many years, and I've been managing private wine collections. And it's not just the crusty old 1960 bottle that we need to worry about, because the current wine fraud that we're seeing is recent vintages, recent releases. So if you think that you don't buy $1,000 bottles and therefore wine fraud doesn't affect you, you're wrong. There's been a lot of Miraval Rosé that's counterfeit. There's more and more Brunello de Montalcino in the $40 range that is coming out as counterfeit. So this really does hit all aspects of the industry. And that is because we have seen such low punishment for those who get caught doing this, that organized crime has gotten into the game. Because if you get caught human trafficking or trafficking drugs, you're going away forever. You get caught counterfeiting wine or selling counterfeit wine, you maybe get a slap on the wrist, if that, literally.
If you like this episode, please email or tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the wines, tips, and stories we shared. You won't want to miss next week when we chat with Wendy Mesley, former CBC anchor for The National, and Maureen Holloway, former host of CHFI's morning show in Toronto. Now they're both the hosts of the popular Women of Ill Repute podcast. Guests have included former Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin, comedian Rick Mercer, novelists Louise Penny and Anne-Marie MacDonald, and talk show host Marilyn Dennis, as well as musician Jan Arden. These two dynamic women will be interviewing me about the book. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a wine that makes you reflect on authenticity, both in wine and in people. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So subscribe for free now at nataliemaclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.